Hi, everyone, and welcome to Legal Limelight. Today's guest is Mordy Levine. Mordy is a successful entrepreneur with a strong track record of building and scaling profitable business. Some of his notable achievements is co-founding TeamAlliance Technology Partners, where he served as COO. He also is a speaker at Tony Robbins, where I met him, and he and his partner advise companies and help them grow, scale, and exit. So, Mordy, I'm so excited to chat with you all things business today.
Thank you very much for having me.
When I heard you speak at Tony Robbins, I think I was I chased after you guys when you left because as an IP lawyer, we're always on the other side. We get to be a part of the deal, but from more of the legal perspective. And there are so many things that I wish I could tell clients right at the beginning when they're growing the company and scaling the company on what to do in terms of IP, because there's so many issues that I see at the end. So when you guys were talking, it totally got my brain spinning, and I wanted to bring you on the show because I think it's fascinating what you've built, and we want to hear about your experience and your journey, but also I think we could share some critical information to help entrepreneurs not get the rug pulled out from them. As I'm sure it was in your newsletter, you said that there's a specific statistic on how many deals fall through at the end because they don't do XYZ. So hopefully we can give some entrepreneurs some tips on how to prevent that.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you get started as an entrepreneur?
Well, I should be interviewing you because you sound like you know a lot more about this stuff than I do. So
we can talk war stories later.
Yeah. So 10,000 years ago, I went to University of Chicago Business School, and I was the youngest in my class. And when I got out, I realized I don't know anything. And everyone I was in their class with corporate, all these different corporate types who were in their 30s and 40s. I was 21 years old. So when I got out, I tried to get as much experience as possible, and immediately realized that I couldn't stand working in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
I worked for Citibank for, I think, about 10, 12 weeks. And I worked for, an internship in Pete Marwick Mitchell, or whatever they were called back then. And so I became an entrepreneur right then and there. I said, I'm not doing that anymore. That was horrible. That was soul sucking for me. Some people love it. I didn't.
I made a post the other day that says, I get asked all the time by young lawyers, how did you know that you wanted to start your own firm? And the answer is always, I didn't know. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I just always made decisions to do something. And most of the time it's process of elimination. I realized, okay, I interned in this environment. I hated that environment. So I'm going to change and do this. And it sounds like that's kind of what you did. You got your toes in with corporate America and decided that wasn't for you.
Right. Exactly.
So then what was your first company that you built?
Very first entrepreneurial venture, I wouldn't quite call it a company, was selling fresh fruit ices on 2nd Avenue and 42nd Street in Manhattan.
That's awesome.
My first venture. That's a big word for what that was, which was an umbrella and fresh fruit ices. And my mother was totally upset about it because, University of Chicago Business School, all that tuition, this is what my son is doing. But so I went through a whole bunch of these little tiny things trying to figure things out. And eventually, kind of skipped the first 10 years of all those little things. Well, actually, one of them was interesting was I was a trader on the American Stock Exchange for a few years. So I was kind of working my way up in my professional skills. Eventually got into the technology industry, became a programmer, and then, mentioned TeamAlliance, and that's kind of the first large venture where we built something. My partner and I, Richard Harmon, built something from scratch, and then eventually did an IPO after about 3 years or so.
That's fantastic. So what's your advice to people who aren't happy with what they want to do, but want to take big risks and aren't really hearing the support from their family or friends?
Yeah, no, I think that's a critical question, actually. That's the crux of it, in my opinion, which is you got to find something you like. Because if life is short, and I'm now speaking from the other side, I'm 66 years old. I'm not my 30s anymore. You blink your eyes and then you're 66. You got to find something you like, either at work or after work, that's going to sustain you and sustain your passion. Otherwise, you're going to look back and regret it.
That's great advice. I know I have two small children, and the oldest is 5 now, and I feel it. We're in it. It's so challenging. We could talk about this, like the challenge of being in the thick of it, whether it's family or building a company. What's your advice to people that are just struggling? They have a dream, they have a vision, they don't want to give up with it, but it's that part of climbing up the mountain. What's your advice to them?
And so just because you have a dream and you want to bake cookies and sell them, and your family thinks they're great cookies and you should go bake them and sell them and become the next Mrs. Fields, doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you should do. It might mean that maybe you do that on the weekends, but you have a day job.
So how can you tell between a good business idea and a not realistic dream?
Right. So I'm really big on proof of concept. We don't do anything without proof of concept. So, there's lots of different ways. Some people, I'm going to go start a business, go invest 50,000, 2 million, whatever it is. And that's great. If that works for them, that's wonderful. I don't do that. What I do typically is I do proof of concept, which is from A to Z. I have to prove that this idea is going to work. And I do it as inexpensively as possible, and only not A to X, A to Y doesn't count. Been there, done that. And then, then you go make the investment and you can't get to Z. So you have to, in my opinion, you do A to Z, proof of concept. And then once you've got, meaning you've done everything, including selling it, making money, getting someone to pay for it, then yeah, sure, no problem. Now you can go whole hog and invest whatever you'd like. But I'm a big believer in proving that this idea is something that's marketable.
Throughout my own entrepreneurial journey, and it hasn't been long, I have started realizing that there's a science to a lot of this. So I love what you said, because I think not everything is a science. At times it's an art, but there are things that can be done, especially when you're an entrepreneur, not betting, mortgaging your home away on an idea, but having that proof of concept. Is there anything else that is a key identifier when you are analyzing potential clients that you want to work with that stands out to you as, okay, bang, this is a winner, I'm going to work with this company?
Right. So I'd say earlier, probably up until about 10 years ago, I would talk to a lot of folks that had ideas or just got started and things like that. And every question I asked had to do with, well, have you done this yet? Have you done that yet? Have you found someone other than your aunt and your uncle that really loves your cookies?
Yeah.
And did they pay for it? What did they pay? Did they really pay? Have you walked into stores? So I'd ask all those kinds of poking hole questions along the lines of A to Z and proof of concept. Now the last 10 years or so, I don't really get involved so much at that level. It's more companies that are out there, entrepreneurial typically, but revenues anywhere from 10 to 50 million. And so they've kind of, quote unquote, made it to the next level, and they're either trying to make it to the next level after that or thinking about exiting in the next year or two. And that's a whole other set of questions.
Yeah. So, and let's get into it. So I would say, I'll ask you, what is the biggest thing that you work on? Like, if you had to say, my bread and butter, the core of what I do or what I like to do is this.
Right. So when we meet new clients, we take them through 21 best practices, which are geared towards raising valuation and reducing risk of a deal failing. Great. What people don't understand is that, you could be a great surgeon and you have 6, 12 surgery practices across the United States, or a great attorney, and or you make great shoes, design great shoes, sell great shoes, make $1 zillion. That skill set is very different than the skill set needed to sell that company. They're two unrelated. But what happens sometimes is you think, hey, I'm successful at this, I should be able to sell it. Maybe that's true, but you won't necessarily get top dollar because you don't know the game. The companies that buy the companies that I represent, typically, that's their 5th, 6th, 7th transaction for that year. So they know I'm not trying to say that they would be deceptive or any of that stuff, but they just know how to do the best thing for their companies. And pay as little as possible, take on as little risk as possible. And that game is unknown to the sellers, to the entrepreneurs. So I kind of awaken them to that, and I take them through everything that's going to happen, everything that you need to do to make sure you get high valuation and minimize risk. That's the game.
Do you have a checklist? Can you, if you don't, can you give us some of the biggest things that businesses need to know when they're selling?
The 21 best practices are actually about 24, 25, but we kept the name 21. It sounds better. And if you're going to ask me, have I memorized them? Mumbling around a little bit, but I'll talk about a few of them, which is valuation. We go through what a valuation looks like, because people don't understand what is a value, what's it made up of, what are the levers that are getting pulled. If you understand the value, it's like you getting a car. I want to go fast. I want to go faster. Well, what do? Do I hit the button on the radio? No, there's an accelerator pedal. That's what you're going to use. You want to go slower? There's a brake. So we go through what are the levers that are going to be looked at to maximize revenue in your company and to minimize risk, because valuation is about both. There's no valuation saying this is what you're worth. It's usually this is a range of what you're worth, and here are some of the risk factors we see. So we look at valuation very carefully. We also look at due diligence. Due diligence, as you mentioned earlier, statistic, 50% of companies that fail, but when they are trying to be sold, fail during the due diligence period. Failure means you don't get the amount of money that you wanted, or someone walks away from the table. Mm-hmm. And that typically ends up in a conversation like this. You know, Francesca, we love you, and we love your business. You did a great job. And I know earlier on, we talked about 24 million, but we're halfway through due diligence. There's some things we see. It's not what we thought. And, so we love you though. We really want to, but we're really thinking in the 16, 17 million. Okay.
How common is that? Because that's what happened to a client of mine recently.
How common is that?
How common is that?
Yeah, it's extremely common because the buyer wants to get the price down. Let me tell you what never happens. We've gone through due diligence, Francesca, and it's so much better than what we thought. Can we pay you more? That happens 0% of the time.
So your job is to get the companies buttoned up. So to make it really, that the seller, the buyer is going to try to do that and negotiate down. You want to have everything buttoned up so that to make it really hard for them.
That has never happened to me personally with any of our companies or any of my clients. That will never happen to us, because we know what they're looking at. We know what they're looking for. We want to have it clean, boring, no stories. Stories are bad. If you have to tell a story about, I'm walking through the house to buy the house, there's a crack over there. Well, you wouldn't understand how that crack it was in. And there was the rain and no. Fix the crack. Make it go away. You have a problem with the foundation, fix it. We don't want to hear the story.
No, it's so true. For companies that are looking to sell or not sure if they want to sell, do you do any advisory in terms of whether a founder should sell or hold out to sell? Because how do you know when is the right time?
So I'd say, by the way, just 30-40% of the clients that I deal with have no intention of selling. But they want to go through the 21 best practices regardless, because they know it's going to raise their valuation, which means it's going to raise them more money, make them more money. So that's part one. But the very first conversation I have with folks is, hey, do you like what you do? Do you want to stay on? Do you want to I hate it, I want to get out. Are you ready to go? Those questions really inform us and themselves when is the right time to sell, more than anything, because it's really a personal decision.
I love how simple you've made it. I did a post about this too the other day. What makes a great lawyer and an okay lawyer is the ability to translate complex things in really easy to understand ways. So I feel as though you've done that with your 21 steps. Do you have a book? Is there, I hope you have a book, or is it research?
You have a book.
That's fantastic. Okay, because I could literally sit and talk with you all day, but for there are a ton of people watching this and taking notes, and will watch the recording. So I'll put a link to the book at the end.
It's a very short book.
Yeah,
14.
I love short.
Good. Yeah, me too.
It's so great. Okay, so we don't have a ton of time, Morty. What I usually do before we close out is I always ask the person, what's one piece of advice that you would have given yourself to yourself that's starting out? So if you can go back in time as a young entrepreneur, what's the advice that you would give
Just
yourself?
one?
Yeah, one.
Just one. Here it is. You ready? Learn to meditate.
Oh, I don't know if the camera will bring you. This is my meditation space over here. You need a space.
We're akin. Yes. Meditation is going to help calm your mind, clear your mind, give you a chance to pause, get out of that whole reactivity mode, stop yourself from getting crazy.
I love that. So I was in Big Law and was grinding it out in New York for like in my late 20s, all 20s, late 20s, and I hit burnout. Had my first son 2 months early during COVID. Like the governor said, everyone stay home for 3 weeks, and we were going to the hospital. That was my wake up call when I realized I was just running on a treadmill, not looking, not living with intention. And so I started meditating. I did transcendental meditation. I went down the rabbit hole, and like you can see, I have a bunch of books on both sides of me. And just like we said, with art versus science, I was like, there's patterns. So Tony Robbins talks about all the time. There's patterns to running successful businesses. Success leaves clues. So one of the big ones is what you hit on. That's why I love having entrepreneurs on the show, because everyone's from different industries, but it all comes back to the same principles, and being quiet, calming your brain, and being in a position where you could think clearly is absolutely one of those important principles that I've seen across the board.
Well said.
Yes. So thank you so much for coming on, Morty. Where can people find you and connect with you? What's the best way to read?
On the corner of 42nd Street and 2nd Avenue, I've got a Fresh Fruit Ices. That'll be me. My website is Exit Strategy Mastery. It just flows. You see how that flows? ExitStrategyMastery.com.
That is so fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. We're here every Thursday. We're typically here at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, but we really wanted Morty on the show, so we changed the time.